Oh, well, good morning. Here it is, another fine morning. I know you're all surprised because I'm back after taking quite a hiatus. And I just was really felt like it was important to make this video. So here I am. I want to talk about Kent Hovind. As you know, tomorrow will be Whack Atheist from Kent. So today I'm doing whack a Kent. Sometimes a bully needs to be whacked. Of course, we're all doing this in Christian love, right? So whack a Kent.
In other countries, look at this. In Nigeria, an atheist was put in jail for blaspheming Islam. Nigerian atheist jailed for blasphemy over Facebook post. Yeah, this kind of freedom you guys want? Let's see. Nigerian atheist activist sentenced to 24 years in a blasphemy case. Let's see. Condone court sentences atheist to 24 years in prison. Wow.
So before I start, I want to tell you that I've edited out all of Kent's commercials for his DVDs, at least as many as I could. Seems like every time I let it go, he comes up with another commercial just for his DVDs. He's just dying for everybody to watch his 30-year-old comments. So this one, can you believe it? 5 links, 5 to the same story. One guy, one country, 5 links. What's the point here, Kent? This has nothing to do with Nigeria. It has everything to do with Islam. And by the way, Muslims are creationists.
In other countries, look at this. Let's see. Welcome to Whack an Atheist Wednesday with Dr. Kent, the Science Show.
Okay, I stopped it there because it just irritates me all to heck. Every time you call yourself Dr. Kent the Science Gent or Dr. Dino, I realize that you're a doctor, but most certainly not of science. It's very disingenuous when you do that. I know you won't stop, but it's still irritating every time I hear it. You do not know the first thing about science, the scientific process, the scientific mind, or dinosaurs. The only things that you know is what you read from your slides or your curriculum. Just like a minister, evangelist, you read a point and then you pontificate profusely about that point. The thing is, your slides and your knowledge is 30 years old. So you have never once in your life had a job where you needed a white lab coat. And I guarantee you wouldn't know the first thing about using a microscope either.
Antagonizer. We believe dinosaurs lived with man. We have Dinosaur Adventureland, and we think we're sick and tired of the devil using dinosaurs to promote his religion. And we think evolution is the dumbest and most dangerous religious cult in the history of the world. It's a mental illness. When you believe you came from a rock, you're mentally ill. We can help.
The next thing I always hate is when you say dinosaurs did not live with man. because you have no evidence that dinosaurs did live with man. Any evidence that you think you might have, you produced and has been thoroughly and repeatedly debunked. And you know that, but you keep using it. You realize that a scientific theory, such as the theory of evolution, it means that scientists have overwhelming evidence to support it. Time and time again, it's been supported. So let me reiterate, science has overwhelming evidence to support evolution. As with any scientific theory, creationists are welcome to provide a competing hypothesis with their own overwhelming evidence and replace evolution at any time. All you have to do is produce an RFP, do an experiment, write a paper, and get it published and have it peer reviewed, and it's possible you could replace evolution. Lastly, I want to mention that I am the father of an adult autistic son, and I find it very hurtful when you say that evolution is a mental illness. Maybe if you had to live with a mental illness, you'd know what I mean.
For your own good. Just imagine, humans and whales have a common ancestor, and pine trees. Yeah, we'll get into that tonight, Dave. Okay, your charts do show humans and pine trees and whales having a common ancestor. Yeah, okay.
Okay, your continual reliance on this phylogeny tree is so frustrating to any scientist. It's created and used as a tool for middle school students. No professional scientist uses it. Okay, so this phylogeny tree is just a middle school point. So yes, any life forms that you care to use for the shock value, humans have a common ancestor with whales. We do. And just as you do when you talk about a common intelligent designer. And you do that often. Yes, evolution needs an enormous amount of time. That's common to most creation processes. When the automobile was created out of a bicycle, it took years and years for it to be perfected to the point we have today. So if you think that 6,000 years is a long time, remember that 2,000 years has already gone past. And before that was 4,000 years for the flood, and then another 2,000 years. So it's not that long a time as far as you're thinking. The problem is that your mind cannot comprehend what astronomic, geologic, or evolutionary time is.
I hate it when people confuse education with intelligence. I love it. You can have a degree and still be an idiot.
Yes, sir. You can still have a doctor's degree, 4 doctor's degrees, and still be an idiot. Words out of your mouth. Education is not the same as intelligence. Trust me, I know. But education in any field is necessary to open natural intelligence and prepare a person for his chosen field. In the 19th century, it was okay for a barber to also be your dentist. So you go in for a haircut, have a tooth pulled, and then leave. But in the 21st century, you expect a dentist to be intelligent and also to be trained and experienced. You need a way to be sure that the dentist you picked has some training, right? You're not just gonna pick a guy out of the phone book or just stop somebody in the street. You want somebody that has some training. So even a minister or an evangelist will need credentials for a pastor to invite you into his primary service. He wants to be sure of what is being taught to his congregation, and so you know that he's going to start asking for credentials, or that he knows you from a long time ago. So when people watch these YouTube videos, like Kurt Wise, PhD, or whoever, they expect this person to be an expert trained in his field. So whatever he's making the video on, you expect him to be an expert. And when you find out that he's not, it really decreases your
Okay,
confidence.
Professor Dave, some time ago, made a video challenge for me, and let me play a little bit of that.
Question 1. Your alleged 6,000-year-old age of the Earth is derived exclusively from the Bible.
That is not correct, Dave. The Bible dates do add up to 6,000. That is correct. If you add up the dates, they're found in Genesis 5 and Genesis 11. It brings you up to Joseph, and we have secular history after that. We know he was the vice pharaoh of Egypt. So it adds up to about 6,000. But there's all kinds of scientific ways to talk about the age of the Earth. Let me show you just a few of them here.
So he says that there is scientific evidence of 6,000-year creation. I beg to differ on that. Not one single piece of evidence that any creationist has presented shows that the Earth is exactly 6,000 years old. Or has shown that exactly, whatever it is, 2,378 years ago, that there was a catastrophic flood. The only people that do that are your biblical interpreters. So you might interpret some evidence as being young Earth and the catastrophic flood, but your interpretations are all based on wrong assumptions and your own information that you do. There are continuing contradictions about dates, and there is no scientific evidence to prove one date over another. It just doesn't happen. You say 6,000 years. Answers in Genesis says 10,000 years. Creation group says could be either one of those, but they're all contradicting each
There are
other.
scientific ways to show the universe is not billions of years old. This one topic, taking away time, completely crushes the evolution theory. If you don't have time, your theory is gone. It's the pacifier that keeps you guys, there we go. That's the pacifier that keeps you from screaming. Sorry, baby. I know you need lots of time for your religion to look good, to turn your amoeba to a pine tree and a human. I know you need lots of time.
Well, it irritates me because lots of time is required. There's not much you can say about that. Takes time. Just like when you bake a cake, it takes time. You can't just put it in the oven and then 2 minutes later check to see if it's done, and 2 minutes later check and see if it's done. Just takes time. Lots and lots of time is necessary. It's only the creationists that must begin to think in terms of astronomical, geological, and biological time. Those are just a long time, and takes a long time for things to happen. If you look in 2 Peter 3, which is one of your favorite chapters, it says, "But beloved, be not ignorant of all of this one thing." I've always heard people say, "Be not ignorant, brother." Or, "I would not have you ignorant." No, I would not have you ignorant, brother. That's what I was trying to say. That one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as one day. So let's think about that while we're doing this.
Galaxies are spinning. Stars in the middle go faster than stars at the outside. Why do we still have spiral arms if the galaxies are billions of years old?
So it's shocking. Truly, it's really shocking that you'd have such a statement from any person who's ever played on a playground with a merry-go-round. You turn that thing, and you obviously know that Coriolis Effect is in effect, and that you're going to see things that go around are thrown out to the edges. I certainly do, and I'm certain that Professor Dave does as well. We all see Coriolis, except for you, Dr. Kent. The Milky Way happens to be one of those galaxies.
All disk galaxies rotate once every billion years, astronomy.com said. Oh, Jupiter is cooling off. I don't think anybody argues about that. Why do Jupiter and Saturn give off more heat than they receive? Well, now, hold it. If Jupiter is cooling off, that means it can't be billions of years old. Because if you go backwards in time, which we cannot do, it would be hotter, okay? Astronomers estimate that Jupiter is currently shrinking 2 centimeters a year because of its cooling, not because it's losing mass. It's cooling off and shrinking down, okay? Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter gives off twice as much heat as it receives from the sun, from cool cosmos. Let's see. You can just Google, is Jupiter cooling off? Despite its sun-like composition, Jupiter would have had to have been 80 times more massive in order to be a star. Due to gravitational compression, Jupiter was hot when it was first formed. It is still cooling off even today. Due to gravitational compression, it's cooling off. Let's see. It's really hot inside Jupiter. No one knows how hot, but Jupiter is cooling off. Just Google it. The Bible indicates about 6,000 years ago, God made everything. So for Jupiter to still be hot is not a problem with me. But Jupiter's moon Ganymede has a strong magnetic field. Well, Ganymede should have cooled solid billions of years ago. Why is it still hot? Interesting. Ganymede, the only moon in the solar system known to have its own magnetic field. Why is Ganymede still warm? Ganymede, the surprisingly magnetic moon. I have a theory about Ganymede. God made everything 6,000 years ago. Saturn has rings around it, but the rings are getting further from the planet. They're unstable. They're leaving the planet. The vanishing rings of Saturn. Saturn's rings are disappearing. Goodbye to Saturn's rings. Well, hold it. If Saturn's rings are getting further away, they used to be closer. They put a time limit of less than billions of years. God said he made everything 6,000 years ago. One more, Dave. There's a lot of them on video one. The moon is going around the Earth. I don't think anybody argues about that. Well, I guess there are some that argue about that. They're wrong. Okay, the moon is going around the Earth, right? But the moon is getting further from the Earth. I feel like we're drifting apart. Space Place, NASA website. I see. Right now, the moon is moving away from the Earth at the rate of about 4 centimeters a year due to tidal interaction between the Earth and the moon. Interesting. Forbes magazine. Will the moon ever leave Earth's orbit? Space answers. Yep, the moon is gradually spiraling away from the Earth. Okay, why is the moon leaving us? Physics.org. Moon's orbit, circular path around the Earth, is getting larger by 3.8 centimeters a year. Be sucked into the Earth. See, the moon's orbit would be pulled, the moon would be pulled in because the inverse square law, gravity is too strong to keep it in orbit. The evolution of the lunar semi-major axis represents a well-known timescale problem. The lunar orbit collapses only a little over 1 billion years ago. Astronomy Journal. What? They've known this for a long time, Dave, nearly 30 years. And you can read the whole journal for yourself. I'll get the reference for you there, right there. November 1994, okay? Astronomical Journal. All right, read the whole article for yourself. The moon is getting further away. The moon causes our tides. A moon that is closer would make higher tides.
Okay, so Kent here needs a lot of whacking on this one. It's very frustrating when Mr. Science can't get it right. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune are the 4 giant planets in our solar system. They're all similar states. They're made of similar material, and because of their immense gravities, the interior is probably metallic hydrogen. As they cool, they do shrink. You're right about that part. As they cool, they do shrink, but the shrinking slows down as they're cooling. They're going to reach an equilibrium. Jupiter is currently at 125 Kelvin. Jupiter's equilibrium temperature is 110 Kelvin. So it doesn't have much further to go before it reaches equilibrium and stops shrinking. Saturn and Neptune also similarly have equilibrium temperatures as well. Uranus has already reached equilibrium. None of these are ever going to become solid or frozen worlds. Ganymede and other moons of Jupiter are kept warm due to the gravitational push and pull of Jupiter and the other moons. So all of this whole system of moons and Jupiter affect each other, causing this temperature increase. So Jupiter and the moons, Ganymede, is warmer than it should be, and so that's why Ganymede is warm, and the interior could have liquid water. The next thing that you mentioned is Saturn's rings are being lost. That's true. However, a big thing here, Kent, the material is being pulled into the planet by gravity. Surprising to you, gravity is something that affects everything. So they're only maybe 10 million to 100 million years old, not a billion, and they're probably going to last another 100 million years. So again, you're thinking in terms of very small time limits, and for scientists, maybe 100 million years is doesn't seem that long. And last of your points, can't even remember how many points you made. Yes, the moon is moving away from us. It was created by a catastrophic collision between a planet and the Earth. And when that happened, material from that collision was thrown out into orbit. And so it began its uniformitarian orbit. And so that's what you're trying to measure.
The moon is moving away by about almost 1.5 inches a year. This fact alone puts the age of the Earth-Moon system at less than 1.2 billion. You guys are claiming 13 billion, 4.6 for the Earth. That explains, if the moon were closer, the origin of the moon is still unsolved. International geology.
Okay, so over and over he repeats himself here that the moon is most certainly moving away at a rate of 1.5 inches per year. And like I said on the previous slide, it began with a catastrophic collision, just like two pool balls. Material was thrown out into orbit, which became our moon. The movement away from Earth is due to the tidal interactions, which you've already mentioned. These tidal interactions started when the moon was created and were larger than they are now, but there were no people around to be concerned about that. I want to make you understand, again, more points that you just don't get. The inverse square law applies to forces and not to the movement of a solid body. It applies to light, and it applies to the force of gravity and other things. But in this case, and you can write out the equation for the gravity between two objects, and you'll find that the force of gravity is proportional to the inverse square of the radius of the distance between them. So if you go back in time, as the moon gets closer, the force of gravity will get larger, but it's the force of gravity, not the radius squared, that concerns you on the distance. So,
let's see, Dave. Let's get some more here.
1 Kings 7:23, and he made a molten sea 10 cubits from the one brim to the other. It was round all about, and
okay, now Kent goes into some Bible stuff here, and I know most of you don't want to address that, but I want to particularly notice these two scriptures. The first one is in 1 Kings, and I want to read it because I have it in the King James Version, so I know that's a problem for Kent. So 1 Kings 7, again in the King James Version, and he made a molten sea. Sea is like a big bowl. 10 cubits from one brim to the other. It was around, and it was round all the way around about, and its height was 5 cubits. So if you think about it, it's basically a hemisphere, because 5 cubits high is half of 10 cubits. And so it is a hemisphere, 5 cubits radius. And it has a line of 30 cubits and did compass it all about. So this was the point that Professor Dave was making, that when you have a circle that is 10 cubits in diameter, its circumference is pi times the diameter. So in our case, as Kent always likes to quote pi to a million decimal places, it's 3, pi is 3.14159. So the distance around the sea should have been 31.1, okay? And it's not, it's 30. So Kent made a big deal about could have been the brim, could have been this, could have been that, it could have been measuring at a different spot. But it says he was measuring from brim to the brim. Okay, so the next verse says, and it was a handbreadth thick. So the sea was a handbreadth thick, and its brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup. So again, Kent is saying that he thinks the brim was a handbreadth wide, and so, you know, they could have, the rest of the sea could have been thinner, and so they measured it under the brim, blah, blah, blah. But here it says basically that the brim was like a cup. So any of you want to try to drink out of a cup that has a 4-inch brim, you will imagine the trouble you have. So it was measured like the brim of a cup with flowers and lilies, and it contained, get this, it contained 2,000 baths. Now, 2,000 baths doesn't mean 2,000 people took a bath in it. A bath is a measure of volume. Okay, so let's look over in 2 Chronicles. The exact same story is reprinted over here. So it says, also he made a molten sea of 10 cubits from brim to brim. So again, this is like the first verse we are reading. It's round in compass, and 5 cubits is high. And a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. So now, if it was measured, you know, at a different spot, it's likely that here they would have a different measurement, but instead they had the same number. And then the next verse, it says, and the thickness of it was a handbreadth. Same thing is said over in 1 Kings. And the brim like the work of the brim of a cup. Again, straight like the brim of a cup. and it had flowers of lilies, just like the other one. And it received and held, get this, 3,000 baths. So in one place it says 2,000 baths, in another place it says 3,000 baths. So remember that Kent says the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate. Okay, so I think we have a problem here, Kent.
Leviticus 25:44. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life.
Okay, so you're saying the Bible condones slavery. Let me go to seminar part 7, where I already covered this in great detail. Slide number 2461. Does the Bible condone slavery? This was your question. Oh, Dave, right here. The only mention of the word slave in the King James is actually in Jeremiah 2. You should get a King James Bible, Dave, okay? Is Israel a servant? Is he a homeborn slave? Why is he spoiled? Revelation in the New Testament, 18. Talked about the wheat and the beasts and the sheep and the slaves and souls of men. Exodus 21, God already showed his hatred for sin toward owning another man. This is in the Ten Commandments passage. He that stealeth a man and selleth him, or if he be found in his hand, he shall surely be put to death. If you steal somebody, put him into slavery, you're to be killed. The word slavery is the problem. In the Bible, it's more like a man taking a job to work off a debt. It's not the 19th century slavery in the South. I live in Alabama, okay? Here's what the passage really says in the real Bible, the King James. If thy brother be waxen poor and fallen in decay with thee, this is a couple verses before the one you read, Dave, then thou shalt relieve him. Yea, though he be a stranger or a sojourner. That means if he is a foreigner or just somebody living in your area, renting a house or something, that he may live with thee. Thou shalt take no usury of him. That's, don't charge him interest or increase. But fear thy God, that thy brother may live with thee. So, is this man simply working off a debt like just about everybody does today, but you're not allowed to charge interest?
Okay, so working off a debt. I really think these people are not working like we are today, and we are not working off a debt. Fortunately, my employer was paying me to work for him. I wasn't working to pay off some debt. Here, Professor Dave has quoted from Leviticus 25, but let's check the King James Version just to be sure, because Kent right here said, made some comment about the King James Version. So note, there are two groups of people here. It's talking very clearly about two groups of people. Both thy bondmen and thy bondmaids, which thou have, shall be the heathen, and round about you. All them shall be thy bondmen and bondsmaids. So he's talking here about Israelites around him, and you can take them in as bondmen or bondmaids, and they will work off their debt to you, or if they reach the year of Jubilee, they will be forgiven of the remainder and set free. But then it says in the next verse, moreover, of the children of strangers that do sojourn among you, of them ye shall buy and their families that are with you. So we're buying these sojourners and their families, which beget in your land, and they shall be your possession. Okay, so you can buy these people, they will be your possession. It never said that about bondmaids and bondmen. So as ye shall take them as an inheritance for your children. So you own these guys. The year of Jubilee doesn't affect that. You can pass them on down to your children. Pass it down to them to inherit for their possession. They shall be your bondmen forever. But over your brethren, the children of Israel, ye shall not rule over one another with rigor. And rigor means forever. So in the Israelites, you can get bondmen and bondmaids, but you can't keep them forever. The other strangers that are in the land, you can buy them permanently and pass them down to your children, who will also keep them permanently. I think this is a clear indication that there was more than just the bond.
Your own good. Just imagine, humans and whales have a common ancestor, and pine trees. Yeah, we'll get into that tonight, Dave. Okay. Your charts do show humans and pine trees and whales having a common ancestor. Yeah, okay.
Okay, yes. And I think we watched this clip earlier. Humans, whales, pine trees all have common ancestors, just like we said before. But they're separated by billions of years. And I think I got the number wrong, but they're separated by billions of years. This is similar to you saying that you and Seth, son of Adam, have a common ancestor. But you and that ancestor are separated by 6,000 years. 6,000 years is too long to show on Ancestry.com that sure enough, you and Adam are related. So there's some more time. And it was you, Kent, that posted this video, and there's the link for it. It's a video on YouTube, which says, time doesn't affect God. His words are perfect. So just as you're saying, time is, that amount of time is too long, then you say time doesn't affect God. And by the way, again, irritates me, you're still using that same phylogeny.
Question 3. First, define.
Okay, I did this to find the word kind the other day. Let me get up to, for sake of time here.
Okay, so here he skipped over questions 4 and 5. Says he talked about those before. So just let me address kinds here. In one video, past video, you say that kinds are all the animals which can produce fertile offspring. And you go into this, dogs produce dogs, cows produce cows, and whatever. In many places you say that the burden of proof is on evolutionists. But every mule and henny is born sterile, as are your zedonks, ligers, and whatever else. They're all born, the children are all born sterile. So Also, if you're going to give me the burden of proof, I'm going to say we have 5 kinds, only 5, birds, mammals, reptiles, fish, and amphibians. So we only have 5 kinds, and big deal, that will not fill up the ark. So remember, when you're saying this about burden of proof, that kind, the word kind, you say is used in the Bible 10 times in Genesis 1 through 5. So Genesis, the word kind comes from the Bible, and kind has to do with how many animals were on the ark. So creationists, you can see there are videos everywhere that talk about how many animals were there on the ark. And certainly evolutionists have no interest whatsoever in how many kinds there are. So the burden of proof is not on me, the burden of proof is on you.
Dave has a Bachelor of Chemistry from Carleton College, MA in Science Education. After years of teaching chemistry in the classroom, he turned his attention to science communication, focusing primarily on his YouTube channel, Professor Dave Explains. Right here. Okay. His career included full-time teaching position, chemistry, biology, and physics at a private school. Oh, Dave, you taught at a private school. So did I, by the way. And substitute teaching for San Francisco Bay Area. So here, are you a real professor?
Okay, so I know that it's frustrating. I'm sure, that you find it very frustrating that many scientific people don't recognize your degrees, and obviously Dave is one of those. Just so people know, you have a bachelor's degree from some school that is in religious education, which is 2 years, not accredited. You have the master's in Christian education, which is not accredited from Patriot University. You have doctorates in Christian education, theology, biblical ministry, and divinity, which divinity is honorary. All those degrees are from unaccredited schools. So every degree you have is from an unaccredited college. You always rest your experience on 15 years of teaching science in very small secondary schools. Those are Christian schools at independent Baptist churches, and are definitely going to be very small schools. As far as I'm concerned, for myself, you can call yourself anything you want, except when you misrepresent yourself as a 40-year expert in all sciences. It's very disingenuous of you. In college, a person learns to be passionate in his or her field. Every chance that I can take to learn something, to advance myself, I do. Any chance. So in 40 plus years, every single field of science has changed dramatically. Think about astronomy and how they've changed everything. Physics, I don't even think there was quantum physics back then. And so calling yourself Dr. Dino or Dr. Kent the Science Gent are very offensive to most people.
In order to be, let's see, a position announcement, generally follow the following pattern in order to be a professor. A possession of a master's degree or PhD in the discipline with those acceptable discipline titles determined by statewide academic senate. 5 steps to becoming a professor in California, where you live, Dave. Earn an undergraduate degree, which you did. Choose a subject to specialize in, which you did, I believe, chemistry. And you do great at teaching it, by the way. You really do. Okay. Earn a graduate degree, participate in an assistantship, get postdoctoral experience, and latest post. Do you need a PhD to be a professor? You must have an earned doctor, must have a doctoral degree in the field. You don't have that, Dave. You call yourself professor. A few decades later, people find it impossible to get a permanent leadership without having a complete PhD. So, Dave, you admitted on your own program here that you don't have that degree and you taught in private schools. And you said you chose to call yourself Professor Dave.
So
right here, just another minute of this.
I decided to record them to camera, just as I would be speaking to my class, and put them online. And that was the birth of Professor Dave Explains. So that was a little less than 3 years ago, and I chose the name really without much thought. It was kind of tongue-in-cheek, to be honest.
So here, Dr. Kent brings up Dave's education and his degrees or his experience. It's kind of childish for you to do that. It's like on the playground when kids, one kid says something to the other, and you say, "No, you're worse." And so I just think that it's a little childish to be spouting this. Again, you still represent yourself as an expert in science, although you have no degree in science. So having a doctorate is an earned honor. You have to earn a doctorate, and it shows a dedication to your field, in this case science. And being a professor is just a job title. So when you I'm looking for a job, you look at the list of jobs, and they don't say doctorate. It's a earned PhD, which is part of their experience. So yes, some jobs require a PhD, but not necessarily every one. So I'm going to look at your references here just to show you what your references have to say. The first one is that thing about cccregistry.org. If you look at the URL for that right there, or not the URL, but what's on the screen there, you'll see that CCC Registry is for California community colleges. And so it's not really applicable to universities. The next one, I clicked on jobs to see what jobs were available for chemists, and lo and behold, I got this job that says adjunct professor in chemistry, or for chemistry. And if you look down there in the requirements for this job, sure enough, it only requires a master's degree. So even this CCC registry is saying,
in order to be, let's see, a position announcement, generally follow the following pattern in order to be a professor. A possession of a master's degree or PhD in the discipline with those acceptable discipline titles determined by statewide academic senate. 5 steps to becoming a professor in California, where you live, Dave. Earn an undergraduate degree, which you did. Choose a subject to specialize in, which you did, I believe, chemistry. And you do great at teaching it, by the way. You really do, okay? Earn a graduate degree, participate in an assistantship, get postdoctoral experience, and latest post. Do you need a PhD to be a professor? You must have a doctoral degree in the field. You don't have that, Dave. You call yourself professor. A few decades later, people find it impossible to get a permanent leadership without having a complete PhD. So, Dave, you admitted on your own program here that you don't have that degree and you taught in private schools. And you said you chose to call yourself Professor Dave. Right here. Just another minute of this.
I decided to record them to camera, just as I would be speaking to my class, and put them online. And that was the birth of Professor Dave Explains. So that was a little less than 3 years ago, and I chose the name really without much thought. It was kind of tongue-in-cheek, to be honest.
Okay, did you notice how he kind of stumbles over that earned doctorate? I thought that was kind of funny. And did you notice that Professor Dave says it was kind of tongue-in-cheek? So it wasn't meant to be, something big, and it is not, the name of your YouTube channel is not any big deal. I mean, good grief. I know guys that call themselves King Crocodile, and, I bet you he's not a king now. But being a professor is just like any advanced career, whether you're an electrician, an auto mechanic, or a data analyst like I was. You're hired. Usually you're hired at the bottom of the ladder and you work your way up. So in the professor case, you start with instructor, associate professor, assistant professor, and then full professor. And so it's just a progression of your experience in your field of interest. Again, Dave said clearly, calling his YouTube channel Professor Dave was sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing. And but isn't that like you calling yourself and your website Dr. Dino? I have a feeling it is.
Covent, when you do not possess any legitimate degrees. Patriot Bible University is a degree mill. It's a shack in a parking lot.
Why do you guys show that picture? It's Hilltop Baptist Church when I went there. They moved later out there, so they're showing this picture. There's a lot of universities that have closed down. So somebody that got a degree from one of them 100 years ago, are they now disqualified because their university closed down? Oh, that's a different
You
story.
did not attend any classes. You did not do any research. You paid money for a piece of paper. You objectively have no degrees of any kind. So why do you lie and say that you do?
Okay, so why do I lie and say I have a degree? Okay, Dave, let me get to...
career since college. So as you might remember from the first Ask Professor Dave, I told you about how... then I went to... Here's me looking real tough
going to beer
in
party.
the cold winter. And immediately after that, I went over to California. I went to UC. When I first got here, I was doing a lot of teaching lecture because there's nobody here. So I taught. I went over to Cal State Northridge, which I did for a few years. So I think about 8 times I taught the course. So I really honed that material. I got good at explaining that material. But through a bunch of bureaucracy, quite frankly, I lost that job, and along with it, the funding for my master's program. So I had to withdraw yet again from the master's program. And but I didn't want these lectures to evaporate into the ether. I wanted them to remain.
You can watch his program for himself, where he says he's not a real professor. He calls himself Professor Dave. I'll show you here. I got it. Slide number 147. Hang on, let me get back over to here. And 147, enter. Dave has a Bachelor of Chemistry from Carleton College, MA in Science Education. After years of teaching chemistry in the classroom, he turned his attention to science communication, focusing primarily on his YouTube channel, Professor Dave Explains. Right here. Okay. His career included full-time teaching position, chemistry, biology, and physics at a private school. Oh, Dave, you taught at a private school. So did I, by the way. And substitute teaching for San Francisco Bay Area. So here, are you a real professor? In order to be, let's see, a position announcement, generally follow the following pattern. In order to be a professor, a possession of a master's degree or PhD in the discipline, with those acceptable discipline titles determined by statewide academic.
Okay, so he's going over the same thing again. Dave says, you don't have an earned doctorate, but, and then Dr. Kent interjects and says, no, you're worse, you only have a master's degree. Well, you know, big, fat, hairy deal. Once again, having a YouTube channel, you can just name it anything you want. It doesn't matter. When you get a job, your employer will give you a job title. And it could be professor, or it could be chemistry funky, you know, whatever. I was kind of surprised about you not recognizing that picture. I know you took all your courses by correspondence, but there is the picture of Patriot University along with all of their description of president, vice president, and whoever. So I think you better check on your picture of your college here. So that's really all I had to say about Dr. Kent, the non-science gent, and Whacka Kent today. So I hope you enjoyed the video. And we look forward maybe to another video soon. So that's all I had.